Hello guys, welcome back, and today I'm going to be talking about Matt Zuccarello, Chris Kreider, and Kevin Hayes, and the trade rumors surrounding them this trade deadline. Now the NHL trade deadline is in full motion, and the New York Rangers have three amazing forwards that they can trade off. But which one of the three will get traded, and where will they get traded to? Watch till the end to find out. Now, currently being 6th in the Metropolitan Division, the New York Rangers are in a perfect spot to sell off some of their big names. Three guys, Chris Kreider, Matt Zuccarello, and Kevin Hayes, could all be traded this deadline and get a ton of assets. But time is running out for the New York Rangers as there's 3 days left until the trade deadline. Now, the NHL trade deadline being on the 25th, me recording this on the 23rd, time is really running out for the New York Rangers to trade all three of these guys and find teams that actually want to get them. But when it comes to the New York Rangers, they're a very interesting team, and they're in an interesting position because they have three guys that could get a ton of assets and a ton of picks and prospects, and of course that's what really New York needs right now. And while last year we saw them go on a big rebuild, ship off a ton of guys at the trade deadline, they weren't really done with that. And this year could be the second year of that very much fire sale that New York could go on. Last year we saw them get rid of guys like McDonough, and this year they got guys like Zuccarello and Hayes that have a ton of interest and a ton of trade value that a lot of contending teams really want and really need. Now, the player who I think is the most likely to get shipped off is Matt Zuccarello. He is a very interesting guy with 1 year left. He hasn't had the greatest season, but can really bring a scoring punch to a contending team that needs it, especially in a top 6 role. But Matt Zuccarello this year, it just hasn't been great for him. He's, in the past, been a very consistent scoring winger and has been one of the faces on that New York Rangers squad. It would be really weird to see him on a different uniform, but I think now is the time to do it. New York still being in that rebuild position. They're not going to make the playoffs, and a guy like Matt Zuccarello is the perfect guy to sell right now. Now, when it comes to overall points, it really hasn't been down here. Currently, he has 37 points in 46 games, but the goals have been a little bit more down compared to years past, currently at only 11. But really, when it comes to Zuccarello, he still has a lot of offensive punch, and even at age 31, he is still performing quite well for a rebuilding team in New York, and he can definitely bring a added scoring punch to a team like Nashville, a team like maybe Calgary, that they really do need, and a guy like that could fit perfectly in a lot of teams' top 6. Now, Darren Drager had a very good tweet on what we can expect from a Matt Zuccarello trade. Now, he didn't list any teams per se, but he listed what the return might be for him, and he said, lots of action on veteran NYR forward Matt Zuccarello, high picks or a high pick and a prospect expected to be the return. And that makes quite a bit of sense when it comes to getting a first-round pick back. I think that's something that New York would probably target. Also, getting a prospect in that trade is something that they are working towards, and they already have that amazing prospect pool, but adding another one with that Matt Zuccarello trade could really help them. But let's say a team that trades their pretty much terrible first-round pick for Matt Zuccarello. I think that could be a very good add for a lot of teams. He brings a lot of speed, a lot of playoff experience, and a lot of character, and just a lot of skill to a team that would need it. And a first-round pick, if it's like in the 20s, is not that much to give up for a very good player in Matt Zuccarello. And the same thing definitely goes for Kevin Hayes, who right now has a ton of value on the trade market. He currently, in 51 games, has 14 goals, 28 assists for 42 points. And being a UFA after the season and being a center, he has a lot of value on his hands right now. And for a team like Nashville, he could really work on there. And having Matt Duchene traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets, that is one big center off the market. And for New York, that's a ton more value that Kevin Hayes could fetch. And while I'm not convinced that he can be a first-line center for a contending team, he can be a pretty solid second-line center, a guy that can add some punch, especially in the playoffs. He's not the greatest defensively, but being a center and having the stats that he does definitely raises his trade stock. And having Matt Duchene off the market and on to Columbus really does help Kevin Hayes and his negotiations here. He can ask for a lot of money, especially for a team going, or if his team trained for him for a potential extension. But for the New York Rangers, it just makes a ton of sense to trade a guy like Kevin Hayes. Even though he is pretty young, still 26, he is a perfect guy that will get a ton of assets back. And just those two guys, and Matt Zuccarello and Kevin Hayes, make a ton of sense for New York to trade right now. I mean, while Kevin Hayes is a little bit younger, at age 26, I still think when New York actually is competitive, when they're actually a competitive playoff team, Kevin Hayes will likely be out of his prime, and that is not what New York wants. They want to get the prospects now. They want to get the picks now. They're still in that rebuild phase. Next year might be a different story, but I feel like trading guys like Kevin Hayes, Matt Zuccarello will definitely benefit New York down the line when the prospects and the picks come up and play well. Now, a very interesting tweet by Darren Dreger gave us a pretty interesting storyline. Now, Kevin Hayes and Matt Zuccarello, I thought the whole time they'd be traded separately to different teams. They're different players, and while they both are very valuable forwards, I thought they would go separate ways. But this tweet suggests otherwise, that they might be going to the same team. Now, Darren Dreger says, now that Duchesne is off the market, teams will dial in on Kevin Hayes. Sources says a few teams have inquired about trading for both Hayes and Zuccarello. Hashtag aggressive. And that tweet really tells us really the story in New York right now, because while I thought they would be traded separately, trading them together actually makes some sense, and actually makes some sense for contending teams as well. I'm going to use the Dallas Stars as an example because I think they can use both of these guys. But let's say they put Kevin Hayes and Zuccarello on the same team. Zuccarello can be on that second line, Kevin Hayes being on that second line. They already have chemistry. They already have that blended in New York. And I feel like a team like that could use that forward help, especially a second line center and a second line winger like Dallas can, is really going to be useful for some teams. And especially I think the Dallas Stars are a decent fit for that. But I feel like some other contending teams could also use that punch. And while Kevin Hayes might not be a second line center on a team like Nashville, they could still use forwards like that have that extra scoring punch and that playoff experience. But I could definitely see them both getting packaged in the same deal, especially if New York on trade deadline day is put into a corner and they don't have too many trade offers out there. They could get one deal done to have both of those guys away for some picks and prospects. And I feel like that's what New York might have to end up doing, especially if there's not too much trade interest in the next couple of days. But I still see it pretty unlikely. We've heard a lot of rumors about Zuccarello and Hayes. Both of those guys are pretty hot commodities right now. So I feel like if they're going to be traded, they're going to be traded separately, but a trade with both of them involved would be absolutely huge. Now, a team that I think should be on both players, Zuccarello and Hayes, is the Vegas Golden Knights. They've been a team that's been a little bit lacking when it comes to goal scoring in the last few weeks, and they can definitely use some of that scoring that both guys bring. Now, when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, it would take quite a lot to get those guys, but I think it would be worth it in the end to really strengthen their team for this year's playoff run. When it comes to a mock trade, of course, I pretty much always do that, but for my mock trade, I have Matt Zuccarello and Chris Kreider, both guys having 50% retained on their salary, for Cody Glass, Oscar Lindberg, and a 2019 first-round pick. And I feel like this makes sense for both teams. Cody Glass is an absolutely amazing prospect. It's going to be a first-line center in the future, whether it's for the Vegas Golden Knights or some other team. Oscar Lindberg hasn't had the greatest run in Vegas and could get his return back for the New York Rangers, and that 2019 first-round pick is something that New York is already looking for and already needs. But Cody Glass will by no means get traded for one of those guys, but if you package Zuccarello and Hayes together, it could be worth giving up Cody Glass for that. And I'm a big fan of Cody Glass. I think he's going to be an amazing prospect, and he already is one. But I feel like for the Vegas Golden Knights, getting that extra scoring depth on top of the scoring that they already have is going to be super useful for that second year, and hopefully that second run to the Stanley Cup Final. Now on to Chris Kreider, who I think is one of the most interesting players surrounding this NHL trade deadline. He's a guy that I think could get traded, but also has the potential to stay with the New York Rangers. But he is a guy that I think will be very interesting. Now, he is 27. He's had a pretty solid year up to this point, playing 60 games, getting 24 goals, 20 assists for 44 points. He is an excellent top six winger and could be in a first line on a lot of different teams. And if we the New York Rangers, he already is that. But a guy who has playoff experience can bring a little bit of that grit and a little bit of that physicality. I think that's something that a lot of teams would want and a lot of teams would crave, but the question is if New York actually wants to trade him. Now, if I had to say something right now, I would say Chris Kreider likely stays with the New York Rangers, but if they get an excellent offer, I think that could all change. Now, he brings a lot to a team. He has a lot of offense. He's having a great year offensively. He brings a lot of physicality and grit into the playoffs, and he has a lot of character in that locker room, and he's a very good guy that gels with a lot of younger players and could mentor them. And that's something that New York probably values quite a lot, being in the rebuild that they are right now. Some guys are going to have to stay on the team, and a guy like Chris Kreider is very valuable for a team transitioning, and right now I feel like New York likely values that a lot. Now, up until recently, we haven't heard a lot of trade rumors surrounding Chris Kreider because the belief out there was just he was not going to get traded. But recently, we got a few articles by The Athletic linking Chris Kreider to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I feel like that is a very interesting fit, especially if Toronto would really be willing to give up a guy like Andreas Johnson. That is a forward that really New York could use in the future and use in the now, and I feel like if Chris Kreider were to get traded, maybe a guy like Liljegren goes back, but I feel like with Chris Kreider, he is a very excellent excellent forward that the Toronto Maple Leafs kind of need that edge right now, especially if Nazem Kadri concussed. I think a guy like Chris Kreider could really help the team and could really be what the team needs right now to go far in the playoffs or at least past the first round. Now, we saw Adam McQuaid also linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I just don't see that happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they're going to get grit, if they're going to get that fighting opportunity, I feel like they're wanting something else also. With Chris Kreider, yes, he is gritty. He does bring that physicality, but he also has some amazing offensive skills, and that's what Toronto also wants there. Adam McQuaid can't really bring too much else besides the fighting, besides the grit, so that's something that Toronto, I don't think, should go for. I don't think they're going to go for, but a guy like Chris Kreider could make it very interesting. Now, while New York might say yes to Johnson coming back to New York, Toronto would also have to give up a lot more than that. Maybe even a first-round pick, maybe even another prospect on top of that, and that's something that New York really, really wants for a guy like Chris Kreider, that extra bit of pieces that a guy like Zuccarello or Hayes probably couldn't bring. And I'm not sure if Toronto wants to give up guys like Liljegren, Rasmus Sandin. I don't think they're going to give up guys like Kasperi Kapanen either, but I feel like that's what New York is going to lean on, guys like Kapanen, guys like Liljegren, but right now, I just don't see Toronto giving those guys up. But right now, I just don't see Chris Kreider being traded from the New York Rangers, and unless they get that superstar offer that they just can't refuse. But for Toronto, again, that superstar offer would likely include a guy like Kapanen, and would also likely include a guy like Liljegren, and I just don't see that happening with the New York Rangers. I don't see that happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I just don't see that fit happening, and I don't see Chris Kreider being traded. But again, this trade deadline is going to be a ton of fun to watch. A lot of great players are going to get traded. A lot of great players are going to get moved. And the New York Rangers have an awesome opportunity to get rid of some of their other guys. Being in the rebuild that they are in, a guy like Kevin Hayes, a guy like Matt Zuccarello can give them a lot of prospects back. If they want to trade a guy like Chris Kreider, that would do them amazingly and would serve that rebuild quite well. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about these New York trade rumors surrounding Matt Zuccarello, Kevin Hayes, and Chris Kreider? Out of these three guys, who do you see getting traded? And do you see a Kevin Hayes and Matt Zuccarello package going to a contending team? You can click on this card right here to watch my video about Matt Duchene and him getting traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets. But that is going for today, guys. If you guys didn't enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on these trade rumors and which of these three players will get traded. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.